Hi everyone, Matt here from Proof Fly Fishing. In this video series we're going to have two videos, and what we're going to do is walk you through every step of making your own rattan grip on a fly rod. So in this first video we're going to start by going over the materials and the tools that you're going to need, and then we're going to prep the grip, we're going to prep the rattan, and we're actually going to wrap the grip. And in the second video I'm going to show you how to wrap silk up the grip, and then how to finish the grip off, including applying spar varnish and then doing a final fit to both your reel seat and your blank. So, for those of you unfamiliar with rattan grips, what we basically have is a cork grip. Sometimes you can use wood, a lightweight wood underneath it, that you shape to the desired size and profile that you're looking for. And then we're going to take this rattan and we are going to wrap it around the grip and then finish it off in a couple different ways. So the first thing you're going to need to do is get a grip. In this video series I'm going to be using a pre-made grip, but making a rattan grip is a great time to use up some of your grade B or your lesser quality rings. It doesn't really matter what the cork looks like because it's going to be entirely covered. So a couple things about the grip itself. What you want to stay away from are dramatic curves in the grip. So if you have a flare, say in like a reverse half wells where it flares at the end, sometimes what's going to happen with a grip like that when you go to wrap rattan over it, I've seen them done, but what you have to be very careful for when you wrap those is to make sure you don't get gaps in the rattan as they start to climb up some of those peaks. Traditionally, you've got a cigar grip, which is what I'm going to use in this video. Sometimes a torpedo grip, but yeah, just stay away from too wide of a flare. So the second thing you're gonna need is just rattan. Make sure that you get fresh rattan. Sometimes you can get this stuff that's been sitting around for years and it's brittle, it just looks terrible, it doesn't wrap right. So get yourself a fresh bag of rattan. And as far as the length goes, I get a lot of questions about that. How long does it have to be? The general rule that I go with is for every inch that the grip is, you're going to need roughly 36 inches of rattan to cover it. Now that's including a little bit of extra at the end, so you should be fine following that general rule. So we've got our grip, we've got our rattan. As far as materials, there's only really two other materials. You're going to need silk thread. Traditional is to put a brown, sometimes a red silk, but you can really use whatever color you want. If you want to match thread wraps or another color of the blank or something in the reel seat, go for it. And the last thing you're going to need is spar varnish. I'm using Man O' War spar. I'll probably use it full strength. You can cut it if you want. If you want to just do multiple thin layers, that's not a problem. But that's pretty much it as far as materials go. As far as the tools go to build this, we're going to need a few things. I'm going to go over a couple different ways to start the rattan on the front of the grip and then finish it off as well. But in both of those, what you're going to need is either a scalpel, you can use razor blades. Those are probably your two best things. We're just going to score that cork a little bit to make a channel for the rattan to go into once we start. What we're also going to do, rattan's going to come in multiple pieces. Sometimes you'll get, a 6 foot piece, sometimes 9, sometimes a little bit shorter. So we need to connect all those together to make one long strand. In this case I'm doing a 6-inch grip, so I'm going to need roughly 18 feet of rattan, and so we're going to use these blades to connect the rattan together, and I'll show you how we do that in just a minute. Another tool, if you have one around, a block plane, I think is my preferred tool for prepping the rattan, prepping the joints of the rattan. But again, we'll go over that in just a minute when I do more of a close-up. Small plastic clamps. I use these when I glue up the sections of rattan together. We're going to use super glue once we get those prepped. They're going to overlap just a little bit, and then we're going to apply a clamp over top of them to hold them nice and tight and straight while that super glue dries. Last couple things, I mentioned super glue. You need super glue. A pencil never hurts. When we're going to prep our grip in just a minute, I'm going to use a pencil to kind of sketch the outline of our reel seat onto the back of the grip so I know how much to sand off in order to get the look I'm going for. A little bit of sandpaper, again we're going to use that once the grip is dry, and we're going to use that to get a final fit, to square things off. If you have kind of a strange start or finish on the grip, sandpaper can help remove that. You're going to need some sort of disposable brush. We're going to use that to apply glue to the grip as we wrap the rattan over it. As far as the glue, I recommend using Titebond 3. It's a wood glue, it's waterproof, and it just works great. It has a good long working time, so it's not going to dry out on you as you're working. Last two things, paper towel, and then I also use a 5-gallon bucket. So what we're going to do, once the rattan's all set and the grip is prepped, I throw the rattan in a little bit of warm water, and it doesn't have to soak very long. It's a really thin, delicate material. 5-minute soak in warm water, and the rattan is soft enough to work on the grip. That's pretty much it. So now I'm going to switch over to a close-up, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about how to prep your grip, and then how we're going to go about connecting the rattan pieces together. All right, we'll see you in just a moment. Okay, we're going to prep the grip first, and then we're going to move to the rattan, and then we're going to actually start wrapping it. So I recommend, if you're not wrapping a grip that's already installed on the rod, to go ahead and open up the cork grip and get it to fit the blank. And then what we want to do is fit our winding check. So the winding check should be just ever so slightly larger than the front of the grip. And what that's going to do is make sure that there's no cork kind of showing through once the rattan is wrapped. So, you know, if you need to, you can, if you're stuck with a winding check and then the profile of the front of the grip is too large, you can just grab a little sandpaper and kind of prep that, sand it down so that you get a nice, slightly smaller diameter to the front of that grip to where that cork check, where that winding check meets it. So once you have that done, I'm going to show you two ways that we're going to do. I'm going to actually just do one when I wrap the grip, but two ways that you can use to get the rattan started. So the first thing, I'm going to hold this up here and see if we can focus on it. What I've done is I've cut just a very narrow channel in the front of that grip. It's roughly the depth of it is the width of the rattan I'm using, and it's maybe, I don't know, a 32nd of an inch or less wide. And so here's how we're going to start the rattan on this, with this method. I'm going to basically insert the rattan right in there, and it's going to hold the rattan for me. I'm going to get it right to the front of that grip as we start wrapping. I like that. This is probably my preferred method because the rattan just doesn't go anywhere. You can see I got a nice transition in the front from where that started, and we'll sand a little bit of that down when we're all done. So that's method one for prepping the front. The second method is to cut a small channel that is perpendicular to the grip. I'll hold it up here and see if you can see it. It's right there. So basically you have a channel that mimics the one we just cut through the front, but this one is the thickness of the rattan deep and maybe a 1/4 inch long. And the way this one works is we'll just lay our first piece of rattan in there, and then we'll wrap right over top of it. And that way we start our rattan without getting any bumps where it crosses over itself. I find this one a little bit trickier just because that tag end tends to want to pop out on you. But you know, maybe you'll have better luck with that than I've had. So those are the two ways to prep your grip. And on the other end of the grip, there's a couple things you want to do. So on this grip, I'm going to use this reel seat, and it's a little, the profile in the back of the grip is a little bit larger than this reel seat. So what I like to do is hold the reel seat up, center it on the back of that grip, and then I'll take a pencil and I'll just lightly trace where that cork check sits on the grip. And go all the way around like that. And what I'll be left with is a line showing me how far down I need to just sand the end of that grip, so that when it's done, I don't have any cork showing kind of around where the reel seat sits. It just goes from the winding check, rattan, straight to the grip. It's a little more finished look. Maybe it won't bother you if you have maybe a 32nd or 16th of an inch of cork showing on the back, but I like it to be as clean and smooth as possible. So we sand that down just a little bit, blend it into the rest of the grip, and we're almost set to go. The last thing I do is I get that back of the grip ready to finish the rattan. And for this I use the same method, the first method that I showed you. I cut a channel, we'll let that focus for a minute. I cut a channel right through the back of the grip, going all the way down to the bore. And what we're going to do when we're done is just tuck that tag end through there and clamp it until it's glued. And again, the back might not look perfect when you finish it off, but you know, there's a technique I'm going to show you to kind of get a nice transition between the back and your reel seat. So that's pretty much it as far as prepping your grip. You know, select the method you want for connecting it, and then cut your channel in the back we're going to use to finish it off. And just make sure your winding check is going to have a good fit and that your reel seat is not going to be too small for the back of the grip. Okay, I'm going to show you how to prep the rattan now. Now, a couple just kind of notes on how the rattan works. You've got two sides. You have the enamel side, which is shiny and very hard, and then on the other side you have kind of a dull, looks kind of like paper. That's the pith side. So when we wrap this, we want the enamel side facing outward, and the pith is going to receive the glue. Now you'll also notice, say on this piece, you can see this little, like these little fuzzies, sometimes these little strings kind of hanging off. I like to carefully take care of all those before I even start gluing anything up. You can try to take care of it afterward, and sometimes it works, but if you take care of it now, you're going to not have any surprises later. So very gently kind of remove any of those loose strings. Get your rattan so it's very clean looking on front and back. So once you have that done, we're going to connect these. And for anybody that, you bamboo rod builders out there, what we're going to do is a scarf joint. So we're going to take a small part. I'll zoom in here a little bit more so you can see this a little better. What we're going to do is shave off some of the enamel side on one piece, and then on the connecting piece, we're going to shave off some of the pith side, so that when we connect these two pieces together, what we don't get is the double thickness of the rattan at that joint. Instead, what we're going to have is roughly the same thickness at the joint as we have in the rest of the length of rattan. So there's a couple ways you can do it. My preferred method is to use a small block plane. If you have one, they work great, and it's by far the easiest. If you don't, I'm going to show you two other methods in just a moment. But what you want to do, put your rattan on like a piece of wood or something, and then take your block plane and try to get, you know, roughly a quarter inch, a half inch is fine, and we're just going to go over it. This one's enamel side up right now, and we're just taking off some of that rattan. We're kind of cutting through the enamel, and I like to get it to the point where it's comes almost down to nothing at the end, as close as I can get that. Get some of this stuff out of my way. It's going to be difficult to see, but that rattan has been shaved down. The enamel's been shaved down until it's basically a point on the end there. So we're going to set that aside, and we're going to do the same thing for our connecting piece. Only we're going to do it on the opposite side. We're going to shave the pith side of that. So we come in and we just take light passes We're just taking the end of it off. We'll check it. Good, and that's about paper thin on the end of that one as well. If you don't have a block plane, it's not a problem at all. You can use a scalpel, and what you'll do with the scalpels, you can, on the pith side, I think it works pretty good to actually take some light shavings off it. It tends to skip a bit on the enamel side, so what I like to do is use it more like a scraper on the enamel side. I'll kind of hold it upright and kind of shave off in pieces or scrape off rather some of the enamel. Again, you can use a double-edged razor blade to do the same thing. Just watch your fingers, and you can get the exact same effect as you get with the block plane. It just might take a couple minutes longer. So once your two pieces are prepped, I like to make sure that the scarf section is roughly 1/4 of an inch. If you make the overlap too long, if you get into like a 1/2 inch or an inch or something, you've got a very secure joint, but you've also got kind of a rigid spot in that rattan, which can be difficult to wrap around a delicate or a thin part of the grip. So 1/4 inch is roughly what I go for. And in this one, we've got the pith shaved here, and then, we've got the enamel shaved here, and then we've got the pith side it's shaved on the other one, and the pith side is going to go over top of the enamel side. So the part that's shaved underneath, what you don't want is a break in the enamel on the finished grip. So the side that you shaved the pith off goes over top of the side that you shaved the enamel. And once you have that kind of set, what we're going to do is take a little bit of super glue, and we're going to apply it to the enamel side. And then we're going to take our pith side and lay it right on top of that. And then I take these small plastic clamps and I just put it together. And what that allows me to do is get my fingers out of the way before that glue dries, and also make small adjustments to that joint. So now I can make sure that the two pieces are perfectly aligned. If you'll notice, just like that, there's no they're not offset in any way. They're overlapping right on top of each other. And I'll let that dry for maybe, I don't know, 10 minutes or so. Once that's done, I'll pull that clamp off. And then what I'll do usually is I'll take a loose piece of rattan or something, and I'll dip it in just a little bit of super glue, and I'll just touch up the fine ends where those two pieces came together on both the front and the back. I just want to make sure that I don't have any surprises in that joint when I go to when I have active glue in the middle of my grip or something. But that's pretty much it. Let that dry good. Check your joints. Kind of run your finger over. You might feel just a really slight transition between the two pieces, but it shouldn't be any more than if you look for the longer piece of your rattan, and sometimes you'll see that has like a little node or a little natural break in the rattan. It should feel roughly the same, and it shouldn't visually stand out either. A lot of times before I'm actually wrapping the grip, I'll just kind of run the rattan through my hands and feel for any bumps. And if I feel one, then I'll just take a blade, a scalpel or something, or even a real light sandpaper, 220 or something, and I'll just smooth that out a little bit. But that's pretty much it as far as prepping your rattan. Again, go over it, remove any of this fuzzy stuff. Again, I've got a little bit right here. It's not a huge deal, but the more prep work you do in advance, the better the finished result is going to be. And so that's done. We're going to let that dry, and in just a minute we're going to switch over and I'm going to show you how to actually glue it on. Okay, we're all set to start wrapping the rattan. So I've got my Titebond 3 in a little cup here. I've got a brush to apply it. I have two clamps. If you're using our rattan kit, all this stuff will be included, so you don't have to worry too much about it. One of the clamps, what I did is I pulled off one of the adjustable pads on it, and I'll show you why I did that when we get to the end. Then I also have some slightly damp paper towel and some dry paper towel, and I'll kind of explain how why I have that in just a moment. So our grip's ready to go. I've got my rattan soaking at my feet here in a 5-gallon bucket of warm water. Again, you don't have to soak it long. 5 minutes and it's ready. If you soak it for too long, what can happen is that rattan will swell, and when it dries out, you can end up with small gaps on your grip. So don't soak it too long. Another thing, when you go to apply, when you put the rattan in the water, kind of feed it in, starting with the back end, and what you're trying to avoid is any knots in that rattan or any hard kinks. You don't want to be trying to untangle something when you have wet glue on your grip. So I've got the end of rattan here. The rest of it's in the bucket. I'm going to take my dry paper towel and just give it a light wipe down. I'm going to take any excess water off it. Now we're going to take a little bit of glue and we're going to apply it to the front of the grip. How much you use depends on how comfortable you are kind of working with this, but make sure you get good coverage all the way around. I usually do, I don't know, a ½ inch, maybe an inch or so once I get on there a little bit more, and a little bit in that channel that we cut, just to hold everything nice and secure. A real thin coat. We're not looking for heavy coverage here. What's nice is this rattan is going to kind of mold to the grip because it's so soft right now. And then we take our end, we find that channel, we insert it into the channel, and then keeping everything flush with the front of the grip. The first turn is flush with the front of that grip. When we reach that channel that we cut, that's when we're going to come down off that one just a little bit. We want those wraps touching but not overlapping. And so what we're going to do is continue to wrap here. And in just a minute, I'm going to hold this up to the camera and see if I can't show you. But what I'm getting is a little bit of glue that's squeezing through the individual wraps. And that's why we have our kind of damp paper towel on hand. When I reach the end of the area that I applied glue for, I'm just going to hold it. I'm going to take that damp cloth and I'm just going to wipe down the part I just did to make sure I don't have any glue kind of sticking through there. So again, we're doing touching wraps, trying not to overlap it. And I'll hold this up here. I'm getting close to the end of the section. And if you feel kind of excess water on that rattan as you're wrapping it, you can use your dry paper towel to just kind of wipe that off. So I'm pretty much to the end of that section that I put glue on. And I'm going to take my paper towel, you can see it right here, and I'm just going to wipe off any excess glue. And you'll be surprised how many kind of little fuzzies end up popping up once you do this because you couldn't see them before. But we'll treat those later. So then, holding my finger over that rattan, the tag end of that rattan, I'm going to apply additional glue below it. And again, we can wipe this off, so you don't have to be overly cautious. If you get a little bit on the rattan, that's fine. Gonna flip it over the other side. Once you're on, you can go fairly quick with this stuff once you get used to it. Now we're going to come back, make sure our wrap is nice and tight, and we're just going to continue to wrap through this. If you notice a little gap, you can take your fingernail and kind of push the hole, the bottom of it up to cover anything up that you might see. So again, I'm holding tension on this rattan, so I'm not wrapping it loose. I'm actually putting moderate tension on it. We don't want to actually break it, but You know, you'll be surprised how much tension you can actually put on it to get a nice tight wrap. And basically you just continue like that all the way down to the end of the grip. I'll wrap a little bit more, and then I'll cut to when we get to the bottom of the grip. But I'm just holding the rattan in one hand, rotating the grip with the other, and kind of watching my glue as we go. I'm not getting too much water on this rattan. It kind of dries as it comes out of the bucket. So really the only section you have to dry is the one you start it with. One thing to watch too, you want to try to keep this rattan as perpendicular to the grip as possible. So you don't, I'm going to clean this one off a sec. You want to try to avoid a really steep angle on this rattan as you wrap it, because if you started to wrap it and it started to kind of, it was angling at a steep angle, just like a pitch like that, what's going to happen is you're going to get to the bottom of the grip and you're going to have about a 1/2 inch grip that doesn't have rattan and 1/2 inch that does, and it'll be at the end. So the closer you can keep it to perpendicular, the better. It's gonna, the easier it's gonna be when it comes to the end. So again, I'm out of glue, so I put my finger on there, hold it, get some brush, I got my brush with some glue on it. Again, about 1 inch, maybe a little bit more or a little bit less, 1/2 inch, depends on what you're comfortable with and how warm it is and how fast your glue is going to set up on you. But it's important to get good coverage. Again, we'll go back to wrapping. Keep your paper towel handy. See, we're just, and with this rattan is wet, it wraps so nice. Now you can see right there I've got a little bit of a gap, and so I can just take my nail, and while that glue is still soft, I push it up and just close it. We don't want any gaps. You'll find too, with this rattan is wet, it has just a little bit of stretch to it, so you can lay it in place, and it really lays down nice. Okay, I think we're going to cut to the end, and I'll show you how we're going to tie off or clamp off this rattan. Okay, we're getting toward the end of the grip, and I just want to show you how we finish this off. So I'm going to finish the last few wraps here, and then I'll show you how we secure the end so we can let the whole thing dry. So I'm just applying the last layer of glue. And when you get to that little channel that you cut, go ahead and put a little bit of glue in there. Doesn't have to be a ton. And just about there. Alright, now we're just going to keep wrapping around this grip. You can see some of that glue getting pressed out from between those pieces of rattan. I'm actually about at the end of my strand, which is good because I'm almost to the end. So I'm going to take my paper towel and I'm just going to clean up that rattan. We don't want any excess glue sitting on the surface of it. Now with our final wrap or two, we're going to come around and we'll make sure everything's nice and tight. Then we're going to put a kink in that rattan right where that channel is. Let's see if I can show that to you. Here's our channel right here with a little bit of glue in it. And we're going to kink that rattan and insert it right into the channel, just like that. And if you'll notice how tight that is right to the end, there's no gaps there. That little channel that we cut with a little glue in it will hold that nice and tight. And then just do a final, you gotta keep an eye on it though, like I just keep it back in there, and then we're gonna keep a little bit of pressure on that until that glue starts to set up. And in the meantime, with your other hand, just take the wet paper towel, and again, we're just kind of cleaning that rattan off. We don't want any excess glue on it. And you can hold everything in place there for just a couple minutes. Another thing I like to do, I'll put my thumb right where that goes in there. And this is where I'll take my clamp that I removed that pad from. And the reason I removed that pad is so I can insert it into the back of the grip. And then I can just clamp it just like that. And then everything stays nice and tight until it dries. Now, you will notice here, and I mentioned this earlier, that because we're wrapping at a very slight angle, you'll have a little bit of cork exposed at the bottom sometimes. And I'll show you how to deal with that once everything is nice and dry. So, but usually on one side it's going to be exposed a little bit more than the other. This side has maybe, I don't know, 1/16 of an inch or a 32nd of an inch. This one a little closer to 1/16 of an inch, or roughly the width of the rattan. So, but again, don't worry about it. Take everything and find it and just let it dry for 8 hours or overnight. Probably overnight because everything was wet. And we'll come back to it in the next video. And I'll show you how to kind of clean this up a little bit if there's any small problems. And then we're going to wrap silk between all of the wraps of rattan to add a little contrast. And the last thing we're going to do is brush on some spar varnish, which is going to give it a beautiful like amber tone. When it dries and that rattan's kind of dry, it's going to look a little bit pasty, but adding the spar with a little bit of the color in it is going to add, really make the a nice finished look on the grip. So, all right, we'll see you in the next video when this is dry. Thanks.